Time for sound design. Today I'm going to make some patches from scratch with the new Ableton Drift synthesizer. This synthesizer is released in the latest Ableton version 11.3 and it's available for all the different versions of Ableton. I will link down to an interview with the designer of the synth on CDM, so if you want to check that out. But without further ado, I will just go into Ableton, create a few different sounds with the synthesizer, and you can follow along how I make them. So this is the Drift synthesizer. Just a quick run through. It starts with the oscillators. There are two oscillators and a noise one. Then the filter, a low pass filter, a high pass filter. There are two types of the low pass filter. An envelope, amplitude envelope, and an extra envelope that you can use for the filter, for instance. An LFO and a modulation section under this tab. And then some settings about if it's polyphonic, monophonic, unison, number of voices, and of course the drift parameter. So this is some kind of analog style, wobbly, out of tune kind of parameter, and then some more settings. Okay, let's start with the first sound. And I was thinking to make some kind of long pad sound that you can play chords with. So this is the default sound if you load up the synth. Let's start by changing the envelope. Increase the attack and the release. And let's go to the first oscillator and maybe do a pulse width, and then the second one is a sine. Yeah, that's fine. Let's lower the filter cutoff and increase the resonance a bit. It's good if I put in some chords, that's easier. So the oscillator 2 is playing in the same octave, otherwise it gets too low. I don't like that, how it sounds. So you want to change the filter frequency a little bit over time so that there's a bit more variation. So I'm going to go to the mod tab and assign the LFO to the low pass frequency. So if I increase now the percentage, maybe 10. So I also assigned the LFO to the shape of the first oscillator to create a bit of variation in the shape, as you can see here in the little visualization. So as you can hear, I used the LFO for modulating two parameters, the shape of the first oscillator and the filter frequency cutoff. Then I changed the envelope as well. I have a longer attack, longer decay, longer sustain, and a much longer release. So yeah, this is the first sound, a pad sound. Let's move on to sound number 2. So for the second sound, I'm gonna create a short sound, maybe I add an arpeggio later. So the first thing I want to do is change the envelope, put the sustain all the way down. The delay also a bit, or the decay, I mean. And I want to change a different waveform, maybe this one. And I'm gonna add an arpeggiator, because that's not included in Drift. And for this short sound, that's probably a nice way of creating a sound. Okay, next up is the use the mod again, and now envelope 2 goes to oscillator 1 shape. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of noise. not too much. And oscillator 2, I'm gonna add maybe a triangle. Gonna put in some notes, maybe a D and a G, the root and the fourth. And then I switch to the third. Or maybe I can play with the decay a bit. So do that in an automation lane. And increase the decay. Quite a lot. And also the filter frequency. Another parameter to play with is the attack of the amp envelope. Now it's at 1, it's like short and immediately hear the sound. But if you increase it, you get that kind of reversey sound. So let's add that also to another automation lane. The only thing to add now is an auto pan, so to create a bit more stereo spread. Now you can hear it goes a bit from left to right, in a subtle way. And of course, now that I added an arpeggiator and an auto pan, it's not just a patch in the drift. So I have to group these devices into an instrument rack and save it in an instrument rack. Because I can't just save it as the patch because of the other stuff that's happening there. This is sound number 2. Let's go to make a third sound. And for the third sound, I want to make a very noisy texture. So I'm going to start with disabling the first and the second oscillator and just starting with the noise source. Increase the attack. Lower the sustain. And use the high pass filter to filter out around maybe 1 kilohertz. Can I modulate the main volume? Put this on 8. So that's a tremolo. Oh, that's nice. So the LFO can go to the main volume and then you basically have a tremolo. So if you don't put it at 100, you get this pulsating sound. Which is excellent. Cut off some of the high frequencies, and then let's add an oscillator. And if you disable this arrow, it doesn't go through the filter. Let's do a triangle. Let's make this monophonic. Okay, so now with playing around something, I choose the Wonder LFO shape and then decreasing the time creates a bit of a stuttery. The only thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of reverb to this. And create a 8-bar loop. So what I did in the end is I used the LFO to modulate the main volume 90%, and then I used the LFO, I put it on Wonder, short time. The filter is, I use both the high pass and the low pass filter, and then the envelope is what you see here. So it is a longer release, sustain at 65, decay at almost 500, and attack at 22. And I used all 3 oscillators, but the first oscillator is not going through the filter. The second one is, and the noise one is as well. So fairly simple patch, splash of reverb on it. So just to recap, I used the Drift synthesizer in Ableton, the new synthesizer that comes with a live 11.3. And I created 3 different patches from scratch with the synthesizer. So I'll play you the first one. So this is like a pad sound. I played 2 chords. Kind of basic. Very long release, so you can have this nice, the chords nicely ringing out. I only use the Drift synthesizer, so no other effects. On the second one, I did use an arpeggiator and also an auto pen. So I have to save this in an instrument rack if I want to keep it. And I added also some automation of different parameters. So it's a short arpeggiated sound. A little bit of noise there. And then sound number 3, which is much more noisy. Here I used the Drift synthesizer plus a little bit of reverb from the standard Ableton Reverb device. This is a monophonic synth, or I put it on monophonic. And one of the interesting things here is that I use the LFO to create basically a tremolo on the main volume, so automation of the main volume. And the first oscillator is skipping the filter by disabling this little arrow. So as you can see, this drift synthesizer is capable of a lot of different sounds. You can go very clean, very sort of analog style sounds, but you can also make it very noisy and wobbly if you want. Let me know if you have any questions, and go check out this synth if you have Ableton, and see you in the next one.